We're live.
All right. Hello. Welcome, everyone. This is our inaugural broadcast of Off the Shelf. And my name is Renee Ryan. This is part of our Step into the Story program, where we just want to just immerse ourselves in a wonderful story. We come to you as writers, booksellers, and readers, and we just want to chat about books, and books. And we just love books. And so let me introduce us first, and then we're just going to really dig into our book that we just fell in love with, all of us, for some of the same reasons, some different reasons, and we're just going to kind of dig in. And so, again, I'm Renee Ryan. I am a multi-published author of historical fiction. Right now, I'm writing World War II set historical fiction novels, and that's pretty much, I'm one of the founders of Step Into the Story, and I think that most of you that are watching this know that. So I'm going to go on to our others here, and I have Barb Wallace. Wait, Barb. And Barb's a multi-published mystery romance author who sold over 1 million books worldwide. She's currently working on her first historical fiction, which is going to be a story based in 1964 Greenwich Village, which is super exciting. When she's not writing, Barb works part-time selling books at Barnes & Noble. So the job funds her book habit. She's a lover of coffee, who isn't, a mother of cats, a terrible crocheter, and a voracious reader. You can read her reading recommendations each month on her website at barbarawallace.com.
And the cat.
And then we and there's our cat. So yes. And then Angela Anderson is our guest today. And yay, I'm so excited. Thank you so much for joining us. And Angela is an expressively prolific literary and editorial services professional who still gets excited when visiting a library, bookstore, literary event, or even when she's purchasing a new book. And Angela has been this avid reader since elementary school. She's my, we are kindred spirits here. She's got a deep passion for all things literary marketing and event planning. She's the founder of the Literary Cafe, a place where authors and readers can connect and grow their reader-author bond through their love for the written word. I just love that. And basically, due to her love of art and craft, of writing and people, she coined the saying, and I love this, where excellence and relationships are at the forefront. I love that. It's her motto that sets the tone and standard of all that Angela Anderson presents. And Angela, let's go ahead and get started. I have so much more I could say about Angela. I just adore you. You're just amazing.
Oh, thank you.
And so what we wanted to talk about today is this amazing book called Island Queen by Vanessa Riley.
Which Angela recommended.
Yes. And so, and I have known Vanessa for a very long time. And one thing that we wanted to start is we're just going to basically talk about this book from inside out. So we're going to start on the outside. So let's talk about the cover. Let's talk about that. And Angela has some little insight about the cover. And then Barb, I'd love to hear your take too. So let's go.
Okay, and Renee and Barbara, I always say boys and girls. Maybe it's the teacher in me or what have you. So if I say boys and girls,
don't worry,
it's my thing. And super duper excited. Well, first of all, okay, guys, we have to talk about this cover. This cover is like gorgeous. For me, it was literally, as you can see, I'm wearing my Dorothy Kerwin hat. I'm channeling my inner Dorothy. This cover is like so stunning. I mean, as soon as you see it, from the hues of the teal blue to the colors in her hats, it was one of those covers that was like love at first sight. And when I saw it, the first thing that came to mind was like, oh my goodness, I would love to frame it. Like, it's so beautiful that I want to be able to frame it. And one cool thing that Vanessa Riley, her publishing company, what they did, if you pre-ordered the hardback copy of Island Queen, you were able to receive a print copy of the cover. Guys, check this out. So as you know, I have to buy my frame for it. But this is the print copy.
Oh, big. It looks really big.
Oh, my goodness. Guys, I can't wait to put it in a frame and literally hang it up. So it was like my dream came true. They felt the same way I did. This deserved to be in a frame.
Well, see, I'm the one that asked about the cover originally, because this is an interesting thing. We have the bookstore I work for has a very big historical fiction readership. This book is not selling to them.
Wow.
And my take on it is not that, because first off, they're stupid because it's a great book, but that the cover is very literary looking, as opposed to in the shelves with the other historicals, which are all women in period clothing looking away. And I wonder if they're looking at it and thinking this is a literary book. I mean, the other day I went in and put up that this is an historical fiction, because I don't necessarily know if they will pick it up and say, oh, this is an historical book. And I don't know if that's the reason, or if it's because it's hardcover, or because it's not World War II, which also could be another reason. But so I was wondering about the cover, because it doesn't seem to be clicking with our customers. Now, maybe it's just our store. But I did notice that it does look very literary. And I was thinking, when I first picked it up, I wondered if when I first saw it, I thought more high-end literature than historical fiction. And it probably does skip that line. I would say it is definitely higher end writing. So,
well, and I think too that, and we've joked about this. I think Angela, you and I have joked about it before, about how all the historical fiction novels right now, they have very similar colors. They have the woman who is in the period piece, whatever that outfit is. She has her back to the camera and she's looking out over whatever, either the warplanes are flying over, or you've got, in my case, the vineyard that they're going through with the chateau in the back. And so I think it's almost like these publishers have trained the reader to look for historical fiction by that similar cover. And then we see the Island Queen, and now we're looking at this amazing cover that to me knowing the time period, it's a very historical period piece. But if you're only looking at that hat, which, hello, Angela, loving the hat. But if you're looking at this, it could even be considered like, it doesn't tell me what time period. It doesn't tell. And I think I can see where there's some confusion there. But it's all you have to do is look at the back to know that it's historical fiction.
Yeah.
And thank goodness that when someone walks into a store like Barnes and Noble, we have our booksellers such as Barb, who is there to say, oh, no, you're going to love this book and you're going to hand sell this book.
And we've marked it up now as saying it's a great historical stuff. But like I said, I think that because it was hardcover and it had this beautiful artsy cover, that beach read season, it scared people off.
I can see that.
Think also with the cover, one of the reasons that it is different than your normal historical fiction covers, as well as too, is that Vanessa wanted to really tap into the richness of who, Dorothy Curran Thomas, who this woman was, or what have you, and who her inner being was. And of course, I know we've read the book, but we know how hats, the importance of hats was to her, and during that time period, and the significance of what the hats actually meant, or what have you too. So I think with Vanessa and this particular cover, or what have you, that boldness and the colors and things of that nature, it represented everything that Dorothy Curran was about, or what have you. And so I think that's also too where she kind of maybe stepped a little bit outside of the box.
Well, and I agree.
Normal,
Well, and that was a great scene in the book. So let's kind of dig into the book now that we talked about the cover. But
the cover was the only negative thing I had about the book. So we're
okay. So let's have some fun now. But I love, kind of segueing into the interior of the book, is that I love that scene where we see Dorothy. She's left Demerara, and she's now in she's basically broken free, and not quite free, but she's broken free of the chains of her father and brother. And what I loved about that was that the first thing she said, what you were saying, Angela, is that she needed something to cover her head, because all the women that were walking around in the marketplace had beautiful hats and head coverings. And she knew that it was like pointing to her and saying slave woman, because she didn't have that hat. And it became really important. And I know she was talking to her sister Kitty, and who she said to her, Kitty, we need to buy materials to make hats. This is one of the first things we have to do so that we aren't, separated out. And I just loved how Vanessa's research was so in depth when it comes to that. And talk about giving me an insight into what it must have been like to, for Dorothy Kirwan Thomas and what she overcame to become a force. And so, I mean, I could talk forever. So let's talk about what was it about this book that really resonated with each of us? And I'd love to hear what you think. Let's start with Barb this time. What do you think? Okay. What was it about the book that you really resonated?
I think that going back to Vanessa's research, which, by the way, I would love to know how she did this with no primary sources, because she did everything with secondary sources. But I think that Dorothy was so multifaceted. She didn't paint her as, oh, she's this brilliant, beautiful woman that went ahead. You could feel how real she was. She was overly proud. She was overly stubborn. But she also loved sex in a time when that wasn't supposed to be allowed. She was an incredible businesswoman, but she really kind of had a little issue with men where she would pull back or get too dependent. I mean, she was really fleshed out. And I kept reading going, I just really liked her. Like you just like the scene in the end where, again, with the hat, where she gets the hat from Sells and she's in London and she finally embraces who she is. And I was like, I literally wanted to cheer. I was like, yes, get to there, go. I mean, you really felt like you knew her and you were hanging out with her, like watching her grow up. And I think that really what drew me into the book was her. I mean, I wanted to know what happened to her. I really cared about her.
Yeah. Which is a brilliant storytelling tool and technique that I think I don't know how much this has been talked about, but we only had one point of view. We only had Dorothy's point of view. And there were such, like, I was with her for 600 pages, and it never felt as though I was with her for 600 pages. And every single character that was introduced was through her point of view. And yet they were rich and multi-layered characters as well.
Oh, yeah.
And we'll talk about that in a minute. But, I just kind of wanted to point out that, yes, I mean, Dorothy was so likable, and I was willing to go on this 600-page journey with her, and I couldn't put the book down. And I can't say, I mean, let's face it, this is not an itty bitty book. This is not a mass market romance. This is, right? And I can tell you, I said something that I thought was brilliant about this book was that there is a literary historical fiction voice. Her voice is amazing, but with genre pacing. And that is so difficult, because I found a lot of historical fiction, especially from romance writers that go into historical fiction, they either tend to completely go voice and then their pacing suffers, or they keep that genre pacing and then the book feels a little pedantic and not quite, almost juvenile in its storytelling, because these books require a richer voice. And I feel like Vanessa, I would love to she needs to teach a masterclass on how she did that, where she has this amazing literary voice, and yet the pacing was still so fast. I couldn't put the book down. So, Angela, let's hear from you. What was it that you resonated?
I know, you see my head. I'm like shaking. I definitely agree with you and Barbara. And one of the things, I guess, if I can start with like the research, and for those that may have the book, there is a picture in the back of the book, or what have you. And to think that when Vanessa started with this story, Island Queen, that's what she had to go on. So the interest in all of that started from this picture, and how her, imagination, as well as her research. I mean, Vanessa is like a master researcher, but to turn all of her research and all of that stuff into the story that we have, Island Queen, is amazing. I loved, you know, as Renee was saying too, the pacing of the story, but you just fell in love with Dorothy. I love how the book is kind of, you know, is set in the different phases of the book or what have you, and you are able to see her journey, even when she developed from, you know, Dolly when she was a little girl, into developing to being Dorothy, and each one of those personalities was almost like a different form of who this woman was and who she developed to be. And just the richness of being able to see all of that research and stuff kind of come into place. She kind of like drew a vivid picture of this woman's life. And as we said, you know, this is not a short read, but I felt like I was emotionally attached to her and that I was growing and going through those phases with her. And I think that's what kind of kept my attention and kept me like engraved of like, okay, what's next? What's next? And the stuff that she went through, as well as a woman and a woman of color, and the power that she had, and you know, the power and lack of power. I mean, it's kind of like, you know,
I know
that she had, and that she was able to use that. I mean, even to, you know, to buy back her family's freedom and all. Yeah, it's just amazing. And it's like she was a woman, and she wasn't perfect by no means, because we know she had her faults and things of that nature, and sure she had her demons. But just to see her kind of get through all of that is amazing to me.
And that's what I love, though, is that Vanessa did not shy away from giving her flaws.
Right.
A lot of times, I've said to Renee before, I don't always like historical biographies because I think that sometimes the writers fall so in love with their character. And there's a couple authors who I've read the books they've read, and the characters are flat because they are so I don't know how to explain it, but there's no flaws. There's no development. They're just recounting their life. Whereas this felt, maybe it's because I didn't know a lot about the period. So in some of these other books I did, but the other part was she was very human. And I keep going back to the same words, but she was not afraid to make her do things, you know, like to embrace the hypocrisy of owning slaves when she herself had been a slave. And she explains it, and she also owns her hypocrisy, which is why you could respect her. Like, she knew what she was doing, and she knew why she was doing it, and she wasn't proud of it, but she did it because it had to be done. And those things that I got done, I really respected the person she was, and said, okay, I get why you did that. I felt like your back was against the wall. You had no choice in these matters. And I kept thinking, what would this woman have done if she'd been born in the 20th century? Because she was such
I had that same thought. But you know what?
Eliminated those barriers, would she be the first female president? I mean, it's like...
But you have to also think that, you know, I think, Barb, you and I had talked about this very briefly, about how Vanessa chose to sort of she really focused in on a lot of Dorothy's relationship through the men that she was involved with, and then the babies that she had because of the men that she was involved with. And at first I was like, okay, this was an interesting choice as an author to do it, to tell that story. Why not through the business end? But it was always through that. But then Barb made a really good point, was that, but women at that time were so enmeshed in the men. It was a man's world. But, you know, honestly, is it a whole lot different, which is a little scary? I think now today, but I know I'm a little bit older than, I know I'm older than Angela, and I know I'm older than Vanessa, is, you know, when I was in college, I was the only female in my major, and it was economics. It wasn't even engineering. I mean, I was an economics major, and I was the only female in that class. And, you know, I was like, I'm going to run IBM one day. And all the men are like, I mean, it was like very much a lot of mansplaining and head patting. And I remember thinking to myself, how hard, when I was reading Dorothy's book, Dorothy's story, and the way that Vanessa dealt with it, it's like, you know, really, even a woman today still runs up against some of the things that she did. It was just more overt back then. and almost tangible. I mean, she knew exactly what she was fighting, and what a hero for all of us. And the thing that was upsetting for me, because I grew up in the South, I'm a very Southern, enmeshed in the Southern culture and all that implies, good and bad. And these kind of stories were never taught to us in school. And we studied Florida history. We studied Caribbean history because I grew up in Florida. And none of these stories were told. And I feel like, thank goodness, unfortunately that we're finally telling these stories, that it's taking this long. But after I got done reading this book, I thought this should be required high school reading. If I was still teaching high school, I would walk down the hall. I taught economics and American government, but I'd walk down the hall and I would tell my English teachers, guys, this is the book that you need to have your students reading. So, and pair up with your history professors. So, all right. So that's what we all love. I mean, obviously I don't think you could love the book if you didn't love Dorothy. I mean, because it is Dorothy's story.
Well, no, another thing is, I think that the other thing that resonated, and Angela, I don't know if you have children, but okay, guys, because you're young. But the idea of identifying yourself as a mother, I think we all got, she had 10 kids, and which 10 pregnancies kind of may have been, a little higher than I'd go, but the idea of, they were losing children, and it was just a time being a mother, and you identify yourself through your kids, because we all do. We can't help that. Even when we say we're independent, we're so attached to our children. And I think that you really felt for her as a mother as well. And, Vanessa very wisely chose to focus on those two themes, her as a mother and an aggressively smart woman who's got children, and how she told it through men, and how she, and imagine at a time where men were very threatened by a woman like that.
Hence the brother. I mean, the brother was incredibly threatened by her. And the other thing that I found, this is somewhat of a segue, is that how she loved those babies, every single one of them equally, with all of her heart, including the ones that were brought into the world by violence. And she still loved those children. And that to me, the way that Vanessa portrayed that was beautiful. And because I know that we live in a time when if somebody is, attacked, raped, let's call it what it is, and then is pregnant by that, what do you do with that baby, and how do you learn to love it? And Dorothy just loved those babies, no matter whether they came out of love, whether they came out of violence, whether they came out of lust. And that was, I would love to think that was one of the main themes that I loved, was the love of a mother that came through, that Vanessa really portrayed well. And I loved that. And so, speaking of all those extra characters, first of all, who were your favorite characters, and who were really frustrating to you outside of Dorothy? Let's start with Angela this time.
Well, and I'm glad that you asked that particular question, and you talked a little bit about the brother. Even at the very beginning, where he vocalized that he did not like her. Or what have you. I think about the scene is very close to the beginning, where they're on the way to her father's property, and they're in the back of the wagon, and he's like torturing her back there, and the father knows it, and he stops and saying, cut it out, whatever. And he even proclaims his love for her mom. But even in the midst of that, she had ways of like getting to him, or even with the words that sometimes she would choose her words carefully, but when she said them to him, they would like slice him, like, or what have you. And even going to that part where when she had to free her sister, and they had to leave, or what have you. For that, I'm sure that was her having to leave her child, like you said, even though that was a child that was her brother, or what have you, however made that the child came about. it was a little struggle there, but her mom had to say, you know, it's for the best. You know, I will take care of, I think they named the child Lizzie. I will take care of Lizzie or what have you. And
one of you will end up dead.
Her other sister. And for me, I was like, you know what? I'm sure that was a hard decision. And like you said, it portrayed that love that she had for all of her children, however way it may. But I think for me at the beginning and the brother just, wow, his character was,
yeah. And you know what was coming?
Her father.
I think, okay, her father, even towards the beginning, I definitely think that the father had a love for her, like nobody's business. Like she was something special to him. Even at the beginning, how he named her, you know, well, he called her Dolly or what have you, and what that Dolly meant to him. And that was actually one of my one of my favorite scenes is when she was 5, but she was going back and forth with her mother, like she wanted to be called Dolly and not Dorothy.
Because her daddy called
her mother even then trained her on the importance of what it is that somebody calls you. And I think from there, I think some of the strength that she had and some of the her having that pride, I think it came from what her father instilled in her early on, or what have you too. So the father, I think that he kind of was that foundation of helping her to establish the that she developed to be, that strong person that she developed to be, and to know that even though, you know, she was an African American woman, or she was a, you know, enslaved woman, that there was more for her. And that was always, I think, that yearning to say, you know what, I can be more, I can have more, or what have you, than just being a slave.
You know, and I think that the portrayal of the father, as somebody that comes from the white culture of the South and from a long history pre-American Revolution, and what I can tell you that I thought Vanessa did such a good job portraying the father in a way that showed the hypocrisy of the white plantation owner and of the white male in the South. And let me tell you, the white male that was still exactly that same way in the 60s and the 70s and the 80s was this, the hypocrisy of, I love my little Dolly, but you are my chattel. You are my property at the same time. And he did not work to, you know, she had the money and he wouldn't free her. And she had to get the money to be freed. And I think that those kind of things from my perspective and having those kind of men in my family and my legacy was so, brought so much angst to me reading that and knowing that I know those men. And I was raised by a man like that, you know, and who was raised by a man like that, who was raised by a man like that, who had a plantation, you know, by that man. And that legacy that, so it's the other side that, and I thought that she portrayed it really well, but it also was just gut wrenching to read that, to read it as, you know, it's actually making me very anxious to even talk about it. It's not a legacy that we want to admit to, but it's also, if we don't, and we don't read important books like this and understand what we brought to the table, then we don't ever get free of it. And it stays in our culture. And this goes beyond politics. It goes beyond voting. It goes beyond Twitter feeds. This is about us in our hearts, understanding what that legacy is that we bring to the table, with the color of our skin, meaning the white people, and especially the Southern white people, and especially with my legacy. You know, my sister was talking about buying the family property, and I said, absolutely not. I am not going to be a part of that legacy anymore. And so anyway, so that was, for me, the father was probably, him and Sells were the most infuriating characters, because I feel like the legacy that they perpetuated, that has been perpetuated for well over 100 years. So yeah. So Barb, how about you?
Said that, Renee. Oh, I'm sorry, Barb. I just
no. I'm finding it very interesting.
That I like that you brought that point up and that you said that, because that was another part of the book that I really liked, was the realness and the rawness. To say, you know, this happened, and there were individuals that was like that, and I love that you brought out the fact that that, yeah, even though he fathered several children, you know, by her mom, he said all in all, they were still his property.
Right.
You find out he sold her sister.
Yeah.
That was like, wow, you know, that he took one away because she was.
And if it wasn't for Thomas, he would not have signed those papers.
Exactly.
And, you know, and try not to be a spoiler alert, but, you know, we all know that she was freed eventually and that she bought her freedom. But it wasn't because the father was being super kind about it. It was that somebody else had to get involved. Yeah. And another white man too.
And even though he told the mom, you know, that he would, you know, because I guess during that time he wanted what he wanted, and he knew that would pacify her, and that's what she wanted, was for her children to be free. And a lot of times that happened time and time again, as well. And the thing about that realness and rawness of it is that back in that time when a lot of that was going on, you know, it's not like, you know, those slave women, that's what they wanted, or they had a choice, you know, because again, they were property, you know, what have you too. So thank you for bringing that out.
No, it was, you know, and this is the kind of book that starts this conversation. Yelling at each other on Twitter does not start this conversation. This book starts that conversation.
Well, I learned more from this book than I learned a lot from this book.
Than being yelled at on Twitter, you know. And so thank you, Vanessa.
Thank you, Vanessa.
Yeah, no, it was a period of time that I grew up in the Northeast, so they don't teach island history there. And it was really, first off, I tend to think that we should be teaching a lot more Black history anyways, because I made the comment to my husband, I said, I learned 3 things in Black history this week that I didn't know, and it took only 58 years for me to learn it. You know, like, that's really sad. But because really there's stuff I should have known. But it's, right. It's books like this teach white people things that we didn't know. And it's the only way we're going to read them, because, you know, only way we're going to learn it is by keep reading these things. And she, like she did such a wonderful job, going back to Vanessa's skills, of showing the hurdles that, you know, the false promises, when she had to go negotiate for her mother, and you know, his deciding he didn't want it because he wanted to change the price because she looked wealthy. And Vanessa did a really good job of not shying away from the really hard truths that we needed to look at, and that white people needed to see white people doing horrible things.
Yeah,
but I
would absolutely agree.
It was done in a way that you felt it rather than heard it. If that makes sense.
So on a little bit more positive note, I loved Kitty. I loved her sister Kitty, and the reason that I loved Kitty was because it was more than just, you know, and this comes from all of my psychology background, you know, studying some psychology and things like that, was that what they tell us, psychologists and psychiatrists will tell you, is that when you experience a really hard trauma, you stay emotionally stunted at that age. And that's not something a lot of people understand. And sometimes it can take years and years and years of therapy for somebody to understand that they are stuck at 12 from that one traumatic point. And I felt like Vanessa, and I know Vanessa's background, I mean, what is it, mechanical engineering and all of that, and how she was able to dig into that and create this character who was stunted after this horrible trauma at 9 years old, and she stayed stunted at 9. And she had been such a fighter, and actually because she had been a fighter, that was why she experienced even more trauma. And at that traumatic moment, and then stayed stunted throughout all those years, and how Dolly still loved her, Dorothy still loved her and understood. And how I think even women without going through therapy and all the, you know, the stuff that we know nowadays, how she portrayed that relationship between Dorothy and her sister Kitty, and that and the wisdom that Kitty had, because she was somewhat stuck at 9 years old, was just a beautiful portrayal. And again, the masterful storytelling, that here I am resonating with this secondary character, not even a really major character. And I don't even have her point of view. And I am just absolutely riveted by that character and by Vanessa's understanding of trauma and portraying it without telling everyone she was, traumatized. It was just so well done. So how about you, either one of you, was there another character, a secondary character that you loved and why?
Angela and I can toss heads to see who said. Go ahead. You tell me first. It's going to be the same person, I know.
You're on mute, Angela.
You're on mute, hon.
There you go.
Sorry about that. And I'm sorry, Barb. My other character was Kitty as well.
Mm-hmm.
Sorry about that. But yeah, it was definitely Kitty as well. And her, I just like the way that Vanessa, like I said, for the characters, I really got an emotional attachment to these characters, or what have you. The way that she just vividly, explored their inner being, and she laid it out on the pages. And so that's one thing that just any writer or what have you, for me to be able to have that emotional attachment in a book, like you said, all 600 something pages or what have you, to keep you emotionally invested, to keep you turning the pages as well, is what I would say about that.
Mm-hmm.
I was going to say Thomas.
Of course.
Oh,
mm-hmm.
He was so patient and so wonderful. I mean, I understood the other men in her life, and I understood Sells, and once you understand why he's behaving the way he is, I'm not going to spoil it for anybody, but it makes a lot more sense. And you get to see him grow up and come to see Dorothy in a different light, which is wonderful. But Thomas was just her equal in so many ways. And when he wasn't, and in the times when, and he recognized when he wasn't her equal. I guess that's what I want to, like, he knew he was never going to be as successful as her, and he wanted to support her. And he was like, what person doesn't want their partner to say, wow, I think you have so much potential, and I will be there for you in any way I can. And I just fell in love with him. And, and he watched him with the children, and he loved every one of those children as if they were his own. And I just loved him. And I think he was one of my favorite characters. He must have been, other than Dorothy, I think he might have been. I mean, I liked Kitty too, but I think it was Thomas. I really loved him. And he was so cheeky when he gets better. And
he was her emotional equal, I felt like. I mean, like, he did not, he wasn't afraid of her. And I think that even Sells was a little bit intimidated by her. And Thomas didn't seem intimidated. And when she would get kind of spicy, is what I'll use, when she get a little spicy, he kind of just played right into it. Like, he was not at all intimidated by it. And I love that. And that comes back to, I think, Vanessa's romance roots and understanding what makes a true hero, that it's not just good looks and money, and that it's that character and the depth of it. And Sells tried to be that man, but he couldn't quite get there because of his background, I think, was part of it. But I do think that Thomas was that man. And I think sometimes, modern culture even will try and tell you, this is who you should have up here. And it's like, no, that's not the man that you want to be with. And the other thing that I loved that she did was that not all 10 of those children loved her back the way that she loved them. And Vanessa didn't shy away from that either, because there were moments when, of course, it could be, depending on who was talking in that kid's ear, Dorothy was a bad person and she abandoned those kids, some of them. And if you're not, and then by the time she's able to say, it broke my heart and it was the worst thing that I ever did, and I did it for you, by then the poison has already been sort of put into their head. And I feel like, then comes back that daggone brother who did that, with Lizzie. And that was so frustrating, but also very real. And I think that's the thing that I keep coming back to with this book, is that there was just such depth in every character, and she did not pull punches, Vanessa. And I just am I'm proud of her. I'm in awe of her. I have always been in awe of her. And now I'm just like, wow, I will buy everything that she ever writes again. And I hope that this book is I'm not a bookseller. I'm not an influencer. I'm just another author, chained to my desk, trying to eke out a living. And I really hope that this sets her into the stratosphere for her, so that she can continue to write books like this. That this book isn't just the book, that she writes. It's not her. It's not the help for her. That she has more coming, because what a voice, and she has a lot to tell us.
I do think it's important for the people listening to know, because she mentions it at the end in her author notes. This took her years to write and research. And I think it's important because we are in an industry where people want books put out quickly. And it's certain and Vanessa, we know, is capable of doing that because she's got a backlist of romance and she's putting all those out. But this is clearly was a project of love, and she spent 10 years, but you can tell all these layers and nuances are because it took a long time to write. And it's a good lesson in not rushing a book.
Yeah.
As a writer. I'm sure she could have put this book out in lesser form several years ago, but that she really worked and worked and worked to really capture what she wanted and capture her vision. And she was patient enough to do that. And I think that, like I said, as a writer myself, I tend to get impatient and want to put books out fast as well, because you just want it done and gone. And it's a good lesson in what you can achieve if you take your time.
Well, and that's the romance model. And I think that's and Angela, I know you've reviewed a lot of romances and you've worked with a lot of romance authors, and because you and I have talked about some of our friends and fans that people were fans of. And I think, Angela, you would agree with this. That's the romance model. And the model is the faster, the better, because and I talk about this a lot, that the difference between a historical fiction book and just a regular romance, whether it's historical romance, contemporary romance, is in a contemporary romance or just a romance in general, historical or whatever, the goal of the author is to have the reader see everything as a movie and never really realize they're reading words. And it's got to be a fast pace, and it's economy of words, it's word pictures, it's show don't tell. There's all these things that we learn. And pace, and fast. Don't ever give them a reason to put down the book. Hook them at the beginning, hook them at the end of each chapter, and move that story along. And that can really, really get into a writer's head when they're trying to do something bigger than that. And in a romance novel, the romance is the plot. Everything else comes around and over and through it and away from it and back to it. In a historical fiction novel, like even in, I would even think that even in, there's so much of the men in this book, it's still not about the romances. It's about this character, and it's about the life that she went through. And so we've got these readers who can read these books in a day or 2 days, or, an Island Queen, a weekend, if that's all you're doing. And I think that they think we can write as fast as they read those, and it's not going to happen that way. And so I would love to see, that more people starting to, I think the historical fiction reader, understands that. But I think that the romance reader that comes over is wondering where the next book is. And I'm guilty of it, as well, because like I just said, where's your next book, Vanessa? Because I love this one. So what do you think, Angela? Because you're the reader, you're kind of a influencer as well. What's your take on all that?
And I wanted to add to what you were saying, and to answer your question is even, yes, Vanessa did a lot of research on this book, or what have you. And even with, kind of like behind the scenes, there is 50,000 words more that had to go on the top of the block.
Oh my God.
So Barbara, that's a little insight for you to know that there was, if I'm not mistaken, and if Vanessa's watching, she can correct me, but I think it's about 50,000 that she literally had to from
a little part of me died. I'm just saying, a little part of me died right now.
Yes, and I would love to kind of see those 50,000 like behind the scene and say, okay, what didn't make the cut? That would be super cool. But I also, Barb, I'm also like you. I love even Vanessa's author notes for Island Queen. Yeah. They were even rich. I even enjoyed the part where she shared with us like the fictional characters versus the real characters in the book. And she even shared with us which characters were maybe, that she may have compiled several different individuals' characters together. And then which ones, like this was an actual person and this was based on that. I was intrigued by even the author notes. And I think that's really cool too, that can actually say that, you know what, I was intrigued by the entire book, to include, you know, the acknowledgments and thank yous and author notes and all of that stuff. To actually compile and make a great story, to see how Island Queen was actually developed. And Renee, I definitely have to piggyback off of what you said too. And I think Barbara may have mentioned it too, meaning that the time that it took her to actually write Island Queen and to share this amazing story of Dorothy Corwin Thomas, and to make sure that when people actually saw this story or saw her story come to life, to know that, you know what, Vanessa, you did Dorothy justice, is what I would have to say.
Her patience.
All right. So in closing, as we close up, as we finish up today, and again, thank you both for being here. I think this was amazing. I hope if Vanessa isn't here that she'll look back and see that, you know, it was a lot of gushing on her, on our part, but you know, I hope it's validating for her. It was certainly life-changing for me to read the book. And that would be my final comment about this book, is that I am so glad that we chose to do this book, because I think, having looked at how thick it is and knowing that I'm on a deadline and knowing that life gets in the way, I may not have taken the time to read this, or I would have taken, it's a book that needs to be devoured. You know, it really does. And I listened to some of it on books on audible.com, and let me tell you, the narrator is amazing. You know, and I learned it's so good. So if you don't have the time, you know, get the Audible book, because you can listen to it when you're taking a walk, when you're in your car, when you're in your shower, getting ready for the day. And I highly recommend taking the time, buy this book in any form that you can, make sure that you spend that time, because my takeaway was that, and especially being a white Southern woman, it was life-changing for me. The only other book that really changed how I felt about just being a Southern white woman was Beloved. And so I would put this book up in that level as Beloved, Toni Morrison's Beloved. And I think that those are two books that every single Southern white woman should read. So that's my takeaway. Now, how about you, Barb?
Well, I'll add a book to your reading list, which turns out I think it's what Vanessa's been recommending it. So I know that it's a fan of hers too, is The Yellow Wife by Siddika Johnson. I would put this in that they're both high, I'm trying to put, but they're not, you can tell that they took time. There's commercial fiction, and then there's a next level up that brings it closer to literary fiction. And I would say that's what Island Queen was, especially. I think it was a treat to read. I mean, it took me 3 days to read 600 pages because I couldn't put it down. It was just really lovely. I can't come up with a better word. It was a lovely read. I loved this woman. I wanted to know more about her. When it was done, I went to Google and I Googled her, and I was disappointed that all there was a Wikipedia page. I was like, I'm really glad that Vanessa wrote this book. She did this woman and her family. When you read what her children went on to do, I mean, this is a woman that should not have been erased from history. And I'm very glad that Vanessa brought her back. And my only other hope is maybe someone will make a movie out of this, because it's the kind of book that would make a great movie.
Yes.
So yeah, that would be, my final thoughts are, it was a treat to read. I had never read Vanessa Riley before. She is going to be top of my list now when her next book comes out, hopefully not in 10 years. And yeah, I'm really glad it was suggested. It was a huge treat for me.
Yes. And I guess my words will be that, again, Island Queen is an amazing read. And Barbara, you definitely hit on that, especially when you have those reads that makes you want to go and research the character or find out more about the character. And Island Queen is not just a book that entertains, but it also educates, as Renee has said as well. And that, I feel that Vanessa would be very appreciative of that, to know that what she wrote in Island Queen, what she laid on the pages, is definitely helping to open the eyes and broaden the horizons of individuals who may not know the story of Dorothy Corwin Thomas, or that there are other women that during that
Yeah.
time like her as well. So that's one of the things that I would take away, to tell individuals that it is an amazing read. Like Barb said, once you start reading, you would definitely want to finish. And she shares a lot of light during that time of the story of Dorothy Corwin. So I think that she nailed it.
You did.
100%.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, and well, I'll bounce just because we made one last point, though. She wasn't the only one, and that's what I discovered in the book. There were many, many successful freed Black women during that time.
Yes.
That deserve to have their story told. So it really was an eye-opening read for me.
Yes. Yes. Well, thank you so much for being with us. Thank you, Barb, for being my partner in crime. And Angela, you are welcome to join us anytime. And everybody, one more time, now that we have discussed it, as you can see, we are all 100% on board. Buy
Absolutely.
Island Queen by Vanessa Riley, and you will not be disappointed. So
worth every penny.
Yep.